Welcome back, listening audience. We are live with another WTTA podcast. This is a nice one. Everybody likes to kick off their Monday morning talking about Suicide Prevention Week, which is wrapped in Suicide Prevention Month. But hey, it is what it is. Every day for us is Suicide Prevention Day. This is what we do. So I appreciate that in life we want to highlight these things and really throw attention to them, because you can't do this stuff every day like we do. You have to kind of break it up. I think it's overwhelming for a lot of companies and a lot of people to address this stuff, but if you're going to do it, this is the week to jump off on it. And then you have the whole month to kind of pass along the message. We got companies like, we got something going on with High Point, which they reached out to us, which I was really, really happy about.
Yeah, High Point reached out and said they would help us kind of promote our messages this week and give away some lockboxes. So what we came up with is we're going to do a social media post on all the different platforms kind of we use and tag someone in the comments that might like our message and like the post, and you're entered to win the lockbox giveaway that day too. So later today we'll post on Facebook. Tomorrow will be Instagram. Wednesday, LinkedIn. Then we're doing Thursday, the newer platform, Trigger Hill, and then Friday, X / Twitter will be the platform. So go on those platforms, and we'll do a post with the schedule to help you out too. But yeah, thanks to High Point for giving away that kind of incentive.
Yeah, High Point, MKS Supply, big supporters of Walk Talk America, one of the first firearms companies to put our free and anonymous mental health screenings in the boxes of all their firearms. Always appreciate them. Their owner, Charlie Brown's been like a mentor to me, but like I said, what's exciting about that is when a company is proactive about spreading this message and understands the importance of it. For far too long, the firearms industry just, we ignored this, and rightfully so, because many times we understood that it was going to be used against us, these numbers. But I think we did ourselves a disservice doing that. And now I like to see the cultural shift of how we're leaning into that, and addressing these things. And manufacturers are basically saying to the customers, look, we need you healthy. You need to be healthy for society, for your family, for your community. And these are the steps that you could take to be proactive in that. And there's nothing wrong with that. So we've come up with a nice little list for Suicide Prevention Week, which is wrapped in Suicide Prevention Month. But some things that we can do as the 2A community to address these issues. And I think I'm going to let you rattle them off, and then we'll talk about them.
Yeah, we're going to try something a little different. I think you and I, we obviously feel maybe too close to these things at times, but we listed kind of 5 core elements to reduce negative outcomes from firearms, specifically suicide. I don't know how tight I'm going to be on this 10-minute timers. We'll try to keep them condensed, and we could probably do a whole podcast on each one of these. Well, we got 5. We'll try to keep them to 10 minutes apiece. The first is kind of the cultural shift among the 2A community to be more accepting of mental health, talk about it more, and place a higher priority on your own mental health. 2 is educating the youth and putting mental health practices in early. 3 is responsible and secure storage. And 4 is better understanding from the healthcare and mental health community. And then 5 is positive legislation. So Mike, let's kick it off. We'll put around a soft 10-minute timer. We'll see how this does. But why I might we'll play some music like the awards ceremony when you're running out of time. Why is mental health culture shift in the 2A community? Why did we place that number 1?
I think it's the most important piece of this whole suicide prevention, better mental health for firearms owners. To me, we're a culture that doesn't like to talk about the negative outcomes of firearms, as I mentioned earlier. Many times because they're used against us, many times because it's just something people don't want to think about, right? Like We actually talked to a manufacturer at Chacha one time, and he was just like, man, like when you buy a gun, it's one of the happiest days of your life. It's like Christmas. And he's like, it's hard to come to the reality that, you know, you need to think about suicide prevention and mental health when you buy this gun, which I can appreciate, right? Like no one wants to think about suicide. That's especially if you don't have any suicide ideology and your world's happy. Like I walk around my house all the time. I want everybody in my house to be happy and healthy. Sometimes I think I drive my family crazy with how positive I can be, or you know, everything is comedy to me. That's how I cope, right? So sometimes people don't want to think about it, but we do understand the numbers. The numbers don't lie. That suicide by firearm is probably the biggest threat when it comes to firearms in general. You're more likely probably take your own life than you are to use your firearm in a defensive situation. Now, it's not saying that some people haven't gotten into more defensive situations and ever thought about suicide. So we're not saying that, people. So for all the gung-ho gun people say that, just not true. We can't deny that at least 74 people die a day by suicide by firearm, right? That's a number that's fact. The number doesn't lie. So it's a number that we can actually put our finger on and try to reduce that number by addressing these things. And what I mean by cultural shift is we talk about it ourselves, we handle it ourselves. That's from top to bottom, all the way from the top, which is the manufacturer, down to the consumer. So if you can get the firearms community to really embrace that having a plan for your mental health and suicide prevention is critical and it's okay, then I think we can have an impact on those numbers. We can have an impact on getting people help when they're in crisis or before they're in crisis, right? It's not always about intervention, it's about prevention. And what we like to do is stay mentally healthy as gun owners. That's part of the plan. So we've made these recommendations, like having this plan when you buy a firearm with your family. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we address it, the better it will be. And that goes, like I said, manufacturers, accessory makers, down to gun shops, over to firearms instructors, down to the consumer, the 2A loving community or the gun owning community. And it's just force multipliers at that point, like everybody carrying the same message, everyone telling you it's okay, knowing exactly where you can go to get help, or at least maintain where you're at if you're happy already. And then we have a better society and we have a healthier gun owning society. And that's what everybody wants. There's nobody that doesn't want that. Gun people want it. Gun neutral people want it. And I'm going to give anti-gun people the benefit of the doubt that they don't want people unhealthy. The firearm, that affects them too. So I think that's an island we all can meet on. And to me, that's why it's so important to have a cultural shift. And I'm going to say one last thing. I want to kick it over to you. By addressing this, by us taking the lead on this, I think we position ourselves in a much better place when we have these arguments, we get into these disagreements with the outside world, the non-2A people. I think that by addressing this, by having our own solutions, we get a spot at the table, where it was a lot easier to not give us a spot at the table before we had our own solutions and we weren't addressing this, right? Because it was like, do you really care? And we would say, no, it's your problem. You need to fix this. This is a mental health issue. Now it's like, okay, we can work together on some things. We can discuss some things with nuance. I think that may be the most important part of this. Well, I shouldn't say that. Healthy gun owners is the most important part. But there's an element here that has prevented us from being taken serious by many people for many years. And I think that we're changing that. But what are your thoughts, Kevin?
Hi, we're running late on this timeline. I have one question for you, and then I'll provide my thoughts, especially on this question. But if you could wave your magic wand in the next 12, 24 months, we'll say Jake wins his wand. He talks about his wand a lot. What would be the single most impactful thing if you could tweak maybe gun owners' mindsets towards mental health, what do you think that area would be? Would it be like nuanced conversations and continuing that, or something else?
Oh God, this is a tough question. And then you wanted to move this on in a timely manner. No, for me, I think the most, if I could wave a wand, I would just have mental health and suicide prevention top of mind for gun owners. Like that would just be part of the conversation every time a gun was bought, right? If I can, and that would start with, hey, maybe that starts with the card in the box, or our link on the side of the manufacturer's box that just gets the gun owner to say, okay, yeah, I got to address that part too. I got to take a concealed carry course. I got to train with this firearm. I got to have a plan in case I ever use it. I know what to do. I got to go get my insurance. If you can do that and you can get your USCCA insurance, or Shield, or any of the other companies out there that provide it, and then I have to implement this plan for better mental health with my family, to say like, okay, everything's fine now. This is how we're going to store this gun. We're going to do this. We're going to have this in place. But if I ever start slipping up here, or our son ends up slipping, and we got to kick this into place too, and make sure we discuss these things. And that would be what I would hope for, because I think all the other stuff will come naturally once this becomes a regular thing with gun owners.
Yeah, if I borrowed Jake's magic wand, I think it'd be just each individual placing a higher priority on their mental health today. That can be anything. That can make time going out in nature or whatever. It seems like gun owners are definitely more open to mental health and kind of walk the talk America than when I started helping, what was that, 4 years ago? And we've come a long way there, but it's still a lot of, oh, I know maybe Joe could use this and he's in a bad way or something like that. And you and I are like, no, no, no. Let's do preventative stuff so nobody ends up in the situation Joe is. And instead of that kind of knee-jerk reaction of, oh yeah, so many people could use this, they're in a bad way. It's no, everybody could do something today that would better their mental health and maybe not get in that situation.
Yeah, one last thing I want to say is, sometimes I think we're the staunch like 2A crowd, the real, probably from my cold dead hands supporter of the 2A, which we all are. I think sometimes we think that everyone thinks like us. It's just natural, right? Because we're in the echo chamber of sorts. We're talking about how important gun rights are, how much we fight for them. But you got to remember, the average gun owner, if you just go by the numbers, doesn't have that same passion for the 2As we do. And I think sometimes we'll use that passion to stay alive. We'll use that passion to put guns in a good light. Like, I've had people literally say, I would never take my life with a firearm because it would be another number that would be used against the Second Amendment. But I think we also have to remind ourselves that not everybody feels that same way. So you got a lot of gun owners out there that, as much as they will use that firearm to defend themselves, they will also use that firearm on themselves in a time of crisis if they're not feeling it, because it is an efficient way to exit the earth. And although that's dark, it's true. And we have to remember, not everybody feels the exact same way about it. Not everyone is going to not do something horrific with that firearm if they're not feeling good up here. So we got to get that right. And we got to remember, that's why we got to talk about it, so everyone feels good about it, to talk about it.
Before we move on, Ghost put in the chat, how do you combat the fact that most people don't feel that they have or ever will have mental health issues?
Well, that's a great question, right? Because a lot of people dig in, and they also don't want to talk about something negative. You don't want to think about that. For me, it's just, and that's almost a little segue into what we're talking about, right? Like, we have some youth programs, we're talking to the youth, and I know others that have a youth program, like say Derek from Kids Safe, right? Like, teach kids young about this stuff to make them cognizant of it. I think that helps, but I think it's more like force multipliers. I think the more, like Ghost is a perfect example of somebody who I think is a leader in this space, because he's always talked about tending to your mental health. And the more I think firearms owners can see the value in it, not necessarily for themselves, right? So maybe you play to that ego. It's like, okay, you're happy, you may never get there, and that's an awesome way to live, but look around you. It's important for everybody, every gun owner, to understand that. So I think that's one of the ways you do it. um there are some people that when I talk to them about Walk the Talk America, I have to kind of tweak the language that I use. I have to play to whatever they see as more important. For some, it's understanding that this needs to be addressed, and people are unhealthy mentally, and suicide is the issue. For others, they might like it, to hear that for them, it's the more important thing Walk the Talk America does is walk into the non-gun crowd world and literally get that spot at the table. And, I've had people say, like, I love what you do to the anti-gun people, so it's like, sometimes you have to find the balance of like what people want to hear, and kind of really play onto that, but you got to be in tune to like how they feel. But Ghost is right. Like, not everybody wants to talk about this. It can be dark and depressing for some. It can be emotionally triggering for some, right? Like, some people have lost people to suicide, and they just don't want to think about it. It's hard to think about your own demise, or a family member doing it to themselves, because there's so many questions that with the trauma bomb of suicide.
Yeah, look at you sneaking in a Conti reference at 8 a.m. of meeting people where they're at. But yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's why for some it's just like, hey, do what makes you happy, and it's introducing making mental health in their mind, but also something that they enjoy. It's not, oh, you need to go in to see somebody like Jake or something like that. It's just do something that puts you in a better headspace at the end of the day and make that a priority in your life. And a lot of people can accept that message, and then maybe you move them along the way and introduce other things.
Yeah, well, on that note, I love when we ask the question to a guest at the end of the show, and that they've never really listened to the show before, because the question throws them off, right? Some people know the question's coming. You can tell because they have the polished answer or whatever, or they listen to the show, and we know they do. But when we have that guest that doesn't listen to the show, and at the very end we ask them how they tend to their mental health, and you like knocked them off balance because they thought they were just wrapping it up. I love that part, right? And it gets them thinking, because after they leave the show that they're thinking about that question, or their answer, or wish they would have answered. I love that part.
And all the answers we've gotten have great examples of just the varying levels of it's okay. We had Yehuda, where I think your quote was, "That's the saddest answer we've ever gotten on this podcast," because he was honest. Of sometimes I just have to push through and try to get through the rough times, and a little bit more maybe darker shade of dark than that. And then other people have maybe a template answer of what worked for them to stay mentally healthy. But yeah, it's funny to see how everybody's knee-jerk reaction is when they weren't expected it.
Yeah.
But well, yeah, this bridges right into number 2, is why is educating the kids so important? Obviously, we have Kids to Kings program and Walk the Talk America that's gotten a lot of momentum in the last few months. Why is a program like that so important in reducing negative outcomes from firearms?
For me, it's you start them young, right? It's just like firearms education. You take a kid. In my family, you didn't talk about mental health, growing up, and it took a long time for me to understand mental health, and I didn't understand it through my first marriage, for sure, right? I became very frustrated with my ex-wife, during our marriage, and some of that stuff was probably beyond her control, with the way that we didn't understand mental health, and she certainly didn't, and I wasn't understanding of certain things. Not to say that could have fixed things, but who knows, if I would have been more in tune to what was going on up here with her, then maybe I could have done some things, or I could at least jump ship. But for me, like, when you get kids young and you're making them aware of these things, it's like literally giving them a playbook for when they're older. And I think that helps with the cultural shift. I think it's super important to make sure that, kids understand that they can talk to somebody about this, or somebody else is in a mentor role is talking about their mental health to make it cool almost. I use the corny example. I've told this story before, but one of the reasons why I never picked up cigarettes is because the very first time that I thought I was being cool with a cigarette, um, one of the older kids who I looked up to literally was just like, nah, man, like, we don't need that. Like, why are you doing that? And that definitely changed the course of how I behaved in the future. Because for me, I was like, okay, Eddie doesn't think smoking is cool. Like, I'm not going to think smoking is cool because of that. So when you take a guy like Devin Perkins, who, with his Kids to Kings program, or Derek LeBlanc with Kids Safe, they're taking these young kids and saying, like, it's not just firearms, right? But you got to be good up here. And now you got these young kids that are coming up, and they're saying, okay, like, that is part of the plan. It's like seatbelts, right? Like, kids these days, they just put the seatbelt on. You don't even have to be told to do it. You don't have to be reminded. It's just, it comes second nature. And that's what I want to do with firearms and the youth, is get them conditioned to be like, okay, this is part of gun ownership. And that's just what it is, not, mental health is just all gun grabbing, and it's not we don't talk about it, because if we talk about it, then it's a bad thing. And, we already know that talking about your mental health and talking about suicide prevention doesn't cause suicide, right? It actually helps people, because they like, okay, we can discuss these things and we can put these things on the table. So that's why I think it's important that we implement this to young shooters. And when I say, like, implement this, it's just like we implement everything else: safety, responsibility, all that stuff is just one piece to the whole future shooters of America coming up.
Yeah, it reminds me of kind of all your template stories that I know are coming and how to finish them. But if you look back at when you went to your family as a kid and said, "Oh, if I would have went to them with anxiety, they would say, 'Oh, I'll give you something to have anxiety about,'" and you have that generation. Then bridging that with the story of your daughter of, "I think I'm suffering from anxiety," and how you handled it. There's already a lot of progress on how mental health is perceived from the leader in the home. What's that going to look like when your daughter's maybe having that same conversation with maybe her kids down the road, and how much can it grow? I think that's the promising hope of the future of take it that next step forward and make it okay to talk about and handle those conversations better, instead of when you were a kid, not only was mental health not talked about, it was discouraged to talk about. Now you're opening up the conversation. Hey, it's okay to talk about. And just that shift alone shows a lot.
Yeah. And that story, I got to tell you, I've told that story a million times now, right? Like you said, you could finish it. But that story is the one that I think really resonates with every crowd. Like, it's crazy. Like, I get more head nods, even when I'm talking from non-gun crowds about that. It's just like the one thing that everybody can appreciate, So I'm in a room with all the mental health people, and I tell that story about, like, if I would have said that to my grandfather, or I would have said that to my uncle, or I would have said that. It's just like everybody gets it. They're all nodding their head. So it's one that I'll never. This is like, um, Hotel California to the Eagles. That story will always be part of the speeches. You know what I mean? Like, Prince's Purple Rain. Like, you're not going to go see Prince and not hear that song, or when he was alive. So you're not going to not hear me tell that story in every crowd.
Goes put something in the chat. It's hard to listen to the younger generation talk about their mental health is the cause of their problems. They use it as an excuse, but don't really understand how much people actually suffer. And I think I had behind the scenes chats with Jake, and definitely in a lot of ways, maybe talking about mental health has gone too far, and finding the balance. But yeah, I think Ghost is right. There's a lot of that out there too.
Yeah, and that's what I always loved about Jake, right? Like, Jake was always saying, like, you are not defined by whatever mental illness that they've stuck on you, and it's treatable, it's beatable. Um, and that's why I think it's just important for guys like Ghost and Jake and everybody else to address these things, but address them with their spin on it. Um, it's not a crutch. Like, don't use it as a crutch. Like, be in tune with it, and know. Jake is I love using Jake as an example because I think we look to Jake, or many people do, because Jake is so put together, like especially the way he delivers messages and how good he is with talking to people. But Jake is the first person to tell you, like, yeah, I'm going through it right now. You know what I mean? Like, and he'll wear that. He doesn't use it as a crutch, but like how many times have we had to let Jake go do his thing, and then Jake comes back to us when he's ready and he's mentally in a better spot. And I think being honest about these things and saying, like, do not use this as a crutch, like, tend to it, come back better than ever. I think that those things can be empowering. But yeah, listening to the youth sometimes when they're just all up in it, and the pendulum is swung way too far the other way. Because you got to say, like, at some point, what are you doing to fix the situation? Or what are you doing to get off the kill spot? That probably wasn't the best phrase to use, but like, what are you doing to get off of that? You can't stay on the mat forever. It's Monday morning.
And we're kicked off YouTube. All right, that hit that topic right about time. The next is responsible secure storage. I put those in slash because some organizations kind of use different verbiage, but why is that important in regards to suicide prevention?
Time and space, and responsible storage is something that can be used as something that helps, that complements the better mental health plan. Obviously unauthorized access is huge, especially like in households with kids, right? Like, I had 2 teenage daughters, and they can be very emotional, just like teenage boys can. And there are situations and times in life where it was the end of the world for them, whatever it was, whether it was a boyfriend issue or school or something like that. So for us in this household, responsible storage, safe storage is super important. And it could even be a temporary thing, right? So, maybe you're just storing your firearm in a certain type of safe when those situations arise, or somebody in the family is going through something. You have other ways to store it, but there may be a better way to store it, right? Like, it depends. It's what's right for you. But that's why it's important. We need to have ways that we can store our firearms, because realistically, getting the firearms out of the house, especially if you have as many as I do, that's not always an option. So you got to find ways. And lucky, I'm fortunate enough to have been in this industry for so long that I have all kinds of locking devices and safe storage, responsible storage devices throughout this house. But for the average gun owner who may just have one gun, they may live in a state where they can't take their gun out of the house and give it to somebody else or store it to somebody else. Or maybe there's not a shop that's near, or maybe they just don't want that because they're like, look, this is a temporary thing. I'm going through it, but I think it's only going to last 1 or 2 or 3 days. Maybe you're housing somebody at your house that's going through it, and you just need to do something for a couple of days. That's why it's important. It's got to go hand in hand with the better mental health suicide prevention plan that we have for all gun owners.
And I think it provides a lot more options and tools if somebody is struggling with their mental health. If there's no maybe safe or quick access locking device, there's no maybe combination you could change if you're a friend that comes over where maybe a transfer is illegal or something like that. We've even talked about like how a cable lock, most gun owners are like, oh, those are trash, but hey, that could save your friend's life if you keep that and they're having some struggles and you just slap that on their firearm for a little bit until they get better. But it kind of ties in with one. If you're not open to responsible, secure, safe storage, then you're going to have a lot less options. And like you say, quick access to the firearms. It doesn't create that moment of time and space. And I loved kind of Joe's answer to that when people are like, oh, well, what about the time and space needed to access it in a defensive situation? If those handful of moments and seconds aren't working, then you did something else wrong in your home defense plan with the lights or security or other deterrents.
Yeah. People also too need to understand that not everybody wants to give their gun to somebody else, right? Like guns have value. Guns also, when you give your firearm to somebody else and it's out of your control or control of your family, I think that that could that could mentally wear on you. You got to make sure that, if I give my gun to a friend and it's now in his control, I gotta hope that he's just as responsible as I am with it. I think the way you do that is have a plan, have your own devices in your house. Like you said, you could change combinations. You have that one trusted person that may be responsible for that, and then you move forward there. Looks like we got some people in the chat.
Yeah, we got a good chat this morning. We had Clover, we got DJ, we had Ghost, lots of people chatting, and yeah, I think it's huge. A lot of the people maybe that come in contact with Walk the Talk's mental health plan maybe don't understand its purpose, but what I love is it starts those conversations before, and hopefully you never need them. But at least if you are feeling a little off, you can be like, you already know the person you're going to. They already aware. Hey, I'll be the one that can help you kind of secure your firearms or help you out. It doesn't create another barrier of an awkward conversation when you're in a bad kind of mental health situation.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. One of the things that Clover brought up in the chat was, if it creates some time and space and, causes you to pause for a few seconds, that could be a game changer. And like you said, couple that with all the other ways that you secure your house, you train retrieving your firearm. I mean, there's so much you can do. And I think it just sends a good overall message to the outside world when gun owners are talking about this thing and doing it.
Yeah, I think this is a good time. DJ just brought it up of Cosapod putting a picture or symbol in where you're secure or storing your firearms to cause that pause. Maybe it's a picture of a loved one. Jake's quick way to point out sometimes that would accelerate somebody else. So maybe that's just a symbol for him. I think Walk the Talk stickers are all over his safes and devices, knowing that if he ever was feeling like that, that would totally undo all the work that he's ever done. So it gives a nice example of symbol, and you have the pictures of your daughters and loved ones. And also, good time to plug in the MedAlert kind of partnership and collaboration we're doing to where they have the motion sensor to where you could put that on your locking device and that could send alert to a loved one and they can send a text and check in on you. That's some pretty cool technology that's being developed.
Yeah, I think technology like MedAlert, if we embrace that as the industry and get behind stuff like that and talk about it, it's just one more. It's one more weapon that we have when we're talking to the anti crowd or the gun neutral crowd in terms of, these are the things that the firearms industry are getting behind. Everyone thinks we don't embrace technology, and we don't. It's not that we don't embrace it. We just don't want to be told what to do. So I think having these discussions and our side bringing these products up and saying that they exist and we recommend them for these situations, I think only will help. And one thing I want to talk about, DJ brought up cause a pause. Cause a pause is one of those things. It's just like the Eagles Hotel California. When I'm talking to a crowd and they're waiting to hear something like that, that is one that the non-gun crowd, the anti-gun crowd, really loves. That's the head nodder too. When I bring up cause a pause, little things like that I think could it's universal for everybody. No matter what you feel or how you feel about firearms, when I bring up cause a pause, you're going to be like, oh, that's a good idea. That's cool. Like a lot of mental health clinicians love that. So having said that, like the more things that we can bring up, the more solutions that we have when we're talking to non-gun people, I think the better. And those are like two examples: MedAlert, the Gun Alert product, things like that, where a lot of people don't know it exists. So you say like, yeah, it's a thing. Like we have that.
Just good segue into the next one of kind of better understanding from healthcare and mental health professionals who are outside the 2A community. And how do you navigate this? Because it's not putting the blame on them, because from the outside of the gun world, you just see the narrative that's pushed by the media and anti-gun side to where it's not technically their fault to not know what they don't know, but how do you navigate that world to help them better understand with some of these things you're mentioning that open their eyes and they support?
Yeah, I think, well, first and foremost, it helps them see some of the blind spots. There's a lot of mental health clinicians that have come through our program, or I've talked to, that didn't even realize, like, oh, wow, I didn't realize someone was afraid of me, or I didn't realize, like, me asking that question was something that, the firearms owner might lie about because they're afraid to let me know. So it's making them see their blind spots. But then that's also an opportunity for us to introduce all these other things, right? Like cause a pause. And then when they see all these different things, they can take some of those ideas, implement them themselves, or, once again, they become sort of a force multiplier, right? Like we've always said that we don't want, or we don't need anyone to come through the course and change their mind on how they feel about firearms. We always say, we don't need you to be pro-gun. We don't need you to be anti-gun at the end of this. We need you to be pro-understanding. And for the most part, I think it's really worked. I mean, very rarely do we see anything negative. And I think sometimes people have to give us something negative because they can't, they can't it can't be all rainbows, and we're asking for an honest review of our course. So, right. Like, but all the little things that people have said in a negative light about it are just like nitpicky things. But what I really love is you do get people that literally say, I need to reframe the way I think about this subject because I didn't think about the things that you taught us in this course. That's the proof right there. I think it's super important. I think it's, once again, we could walk this earth and try to find all the people that are gun neutral or anti-gun and try to talk firearms to them. And I think a lot of them won't care just because they're not into firearms. So we can tell them how great shooting is and how therapeutic it can be and how awesome it is to be able to defend your community and your family. And they do not care. But when you start giving them topics that have nuance and that they can kind of join in and feel like there's some sort of, people care, especially gun owners care about other humans. I think it's just better for the industry as a whole. Like it just makes it so much easier to come and be like, yeah, you can't talk about firearms with me, but what you can talk about is responsibility and safety and saving lives. And, we can mix it up there. Like we have some things that we can talk about where I can show you what we're doing as an industry and as a community. And you could be like, man, that's really cool. I tell the story about how when I was trying to make this work and it got to a point where I had to start driving Uber. Right. And I just was out there driving Uber, doing it at night. Sometimes at 3 a.m, I go drive, saying, what am I doing with my life here? Like, is this going to work? Can I get people to support this? People would ask me, do you like driving Uber? Which is always a very funny question. It's like, no, I don't think anybody likes driving Uber. Uber is a way to maintain and get to where you are. It's a bridge, essentially, if you're doing something. But every time I would tell them about Walk the Talk America, there wasn't a person that didn't think it was a good idea or that was really awesome. And they wished me well, right? They wished me luck. And you had all kinds of anti-gun people get in that car. but every single one of them said this is much needed. Like something like this is much needed. So the more we talk about this,
Yeah, it'd be nice if people could shadow you, or even in the conversations that like I'm involved with where we're consulting with healthcare organizations that are curious and want to do the right thing. When we tell them, hey, when you put on the number one bullet point of your brochure that people need to separate the ammunition from their firearms, that's going to turn them off and kind of disregard the rest of the information on your flyer. A lot of them are curious and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And once you explain the why and understanding, they're totally on board. Now, yes, Walk the Talk America is positioned how it is with being pro 2A, and some of those other organizations that would be against that don't even come to us for advice or consulting work. But there's a lot of good out there that want to better understand and better help people, and they just don't know how, and are very appreciative of all the advice you give and direction you provide. And it's not a combative thing. It's a, oh, we didn't understand that. No, no brainer. Check, done.
yeah, if you think about, just think about our conversation with Patrick from MedAlert the other day. Um, MedAlert is a technology company, essentially. They're not a gun. They have a product that they came up with called Gun Alert, but it didn't start as Gun Alert. They started as MedAlert, right? Which was basically devices to track people with Alzheimer's or any other situation like that. Patrick literally came out and said, we're pro 2A. I mean, people need to understand like how awesome that is. They made a product and they said we're pro 2A and they're going to stand by that. They didn't have to do that. They could have just been like every other company that just wants to. Obviously, a gun company is pro 2A, like everybody knows that, right? But with technology, I think we always think that they're anti-gun or at least going to stay gun neutral. Patrick made this product, and their company's stance, and they're publicly traded, is that they're pro 2A. They want to uphold the Second Amendment. I think that we can get more companies to come out and say like they're pro 2A if we start working on things together. It's just my belief, right? I think that we can inspire more people to be involved in this conversation. Yeah, I'm going to give an example of like Bursa, like, you know, Bursa taking the free and anonymous mental health screening card, flipping it over and translating it into Spanish. They literally found a way to make our card more accessible to more people. And I think that's awesome, right? So I think if we keep coming up with these ideas and making it okay, and inspiring even people outside of the gun community, you'd be like, okay, like I see where they're going with this. Like, what if we did this? What if we did that? I mean, for those that are listening right now that didn't know, we talked to Patrick from MedAlert. If you go back and you listen to that episode, and we're going to get that episode up, like the polished one, we had some technical difficulties, of course, because it wouldn't be a WTTA podcast without some technical difficulties. Knock on wood, we haven't had one yet today. But you'll hear a real life example of a person. My favorite part of that show was when he started talking about mandates, right? And how maybe some things should be mandated, like training, things like that. And he asked our opinion, and we both said, no, we don't think anything should be mandated. And then he changed his mind in real time about how he felt about mandates by talking to us and hearing why we don't like it, but then came up with an awesome idea that he's literally running with when he was like, what about QR codes that we can make easy for firearms industry people to have these different options to where they can scan it. And I love that. I think that was a perfect example of like how it can be compared to how it was when people would mess with the firearms industry or talk to representatives of the firearms industry. Now it's like we can inspire people to maybe come off of what they believe and say, okay, well, what if we did this? And that's what I love about it. It's like an obstacle. You see an obstacle, you see a mountain. It's like, how do we get around it? Okay, we can't just blow it up. Okay, that's fine. Okay, I get it. Like, I'm not compromising, but we're going to get around it somehow. So we can't just blow up the mountain. Let's figure out a way to get around it. And I think that was a perfect example of that.
Yeah, he came at it kind of curious and had his stance, and it was evident that he kind of put in some thought behind it and why he thought that would just be a simple solution, but then was open to our feedback. And I think the way you did it, and we just presented it of here's the other perspective, not just like here's why that's the worst idea ever or defensive of anything, but we just presented here's some kind of opposing opinions of what we're aware of. And then he's like, okay. And then, yeah, you saw it real time with him adjusting around the mountain and find something that would work that's not based off the idea he held 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, no, I love to see that, and I think we'll see more of it. And I think that all stems from, if anything, Walk Talk America has left their imprint on society. We got a long way to go. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I think it's getting people to change their perspective. I mean, I kind of talked about the Hollywood thing, with the writers that, we're working with some people in Hollywood right now because they want to implement more responsible gun ownership into scripts, whether it's television or movies. And I'm excited about that because there's so much possibility to show the country that the 2A community can be your ally in this. We can help reduce negative outcomes of firearms, but you can't make us a bad guy anymore, or you can't just use our tool and show it in one light. And not show all the majority or the majority of firearms owners in this country are responsible and nothing bad ever happens. Because with the sheer amount of guns out there, if it were the other way, it would just be utter chaos in this country, and we really would have a super bad issue when it comes to negative outcomes of firearms. And I think we're doing pretty good for the sheer amount of volume that's out there, and the standard we're held to by society. So I think there's some positive things that have come from Walk Talk America. And, you have force multipliers out there, right? You got the Kids to Kings, you got Hold My Guns, you got Kids Safe, you got Be the Female. I mean, all these different organizations out there, NSSF Suicide Prevention Program, Child Safe. No one shines lights on them, but we're going to get that spotlight. We're going to get there. Like, we're going to make people know that this stuff exists, but we just got to build these programs up and make them a little bit more larger than they are now. But I think that, society is ready for it. I think they're ready to hear from our side. You're going to have those people that still dig in and just hate guns and want them to all go away. And, especially after the last week's tragedy in Georgia, I'm friends with a lot of people that claim they're pro-gun, that are on the other side. And then this happens and they emotionally react. And I try to stay just, hey, like, let them vent, let them do their thing. But I also look at all these situations as like, when things calm down, like, that's when we can get the most work done. I hate that those things shine light on the organization and push us to the forefront. But like I said at the beginning of the show, every day is Suicide Prevention Day for us. Like, we don't get to sleep. We don't get to take a day off. Like, it's 365 for us. It's all mental health. It's all negative outcomes of firearms. We don't even have another department. Like, NSSF deals with suicide prevention, but then they have to go to the legislation stuff. They have to go to the conservation stuff. There's so much NSSF has to do. We live this every single day. But I think we're equipped to handle that. Like, so.
And it's cool to see some past efforts actually come to reality. I know you and I can get discouraged when we put in some time and effort and then nothing comes out of it. Like our work with Man Therapy, that was last November when we were doing those consulting calls and kind of guiding them through. And then we just got the email last week of, hey, here's that video that came out of that work that you guys helped us with. We're like, wow, that took a while to where we move quick, and that great for us, but it sometimes can be frustrating with working with larger organizations that do take time and not see the fruits of our labors until almost 11 months later.
Yeah, well, not only do we work quick, we work with a fraction of the budget that all these people have, and it gets super freaking annoying, but it is what it is. Hopefully one day we'll be rewarded and we'll have some room to breathe and not have someone stepping on our air hose all the time for all the ideas that we have and want to do. But yeah, does get frustrating when it takes a long time. But that's one of the benefits of being lean and mean and nimble. You know what I mean? We're able to react it's so funny because like, look how quickly we were able to put in place the mental health curriculum and suicide prevention curriculum for firearms instructors. Like we literally, like from idea to finishing it was less than a month, right? And I know there's some organizations that are coming out with their own version of it, and it's still not out. You know, it's so when it comes out, it'll probably really nice and polished, and we'll be impressed. But at the same time, every day that goes by when you waste time and you take forever, people are dying. People are mentally unhealthy. So
And then I think some of the consulting work also goes into potential positive legislation. We know like the Armory Project has actually had success getting legislation introduced that is a benefit for gun owners. And there's a lot of ideas that you've had that have a lot of support. And it seems like everywhere I've seen the majority is supportive. It's just like how to fund it or get it done. So why can that be a core element of suicide prevention?
you brought up the Armory Project, and before I go on a rant, I just want to give flowers to Gala True over at TAPS, which is the Armory Project out of Louisiana. Gala is one of the few people that when I walk into a room at these meetings that is like full of researchers, suicide prevention people, mental health people, and gun people, like she's one of the few people that I look at and go, that right there, that's like my, and I mean this in a healthy way, like that's my good competition. Like she makes me want to be better at this because I think she's the only one that could rival me. You know, like everybody has that person. You know, Larry Bird and Magic, right? Like they made each other better, and I love that we work together, we get along. But she was one of the few people that when I heard about what she was doing, I was like, damn, like that's a person that can get stuff done, and that's a person that looks at that mountain and says, let's get around it. I don't want to waste time, right? Like, so I want to give her flowers for sure. But yeah, positive legislation. Everybody thinks guns can't have positive legislation because you think legislation bad. Your mind automatically defaults to restriction, and for the most part, you're right because if you look at the past, that's everyone's answer. But let's face it, there is some positive legislation that could happen when we talk about, you know, just like what Galley got done in the state of Louisiana. You know, they were having trouble having gun shops sign up for their safe storage program. Most of the gun shops were saying, hey, look, what about the liability? We don't want to give the gun back too soon. What if something happens? It's probably better for us not to do this. It's just safer. And Gala like literally was like, okay, well, what if we got some legislation that, you know, exonerated you in that situation? You know, you didn't have to worry about that. And they were like, maybe, let's see if we can get it done. She got it done on the first try. Right. And then after that, all the gun shops came forward because now she put them on the spot and she has a nice little network out there and they're doing some amazing things. So much that all these different states now contact her on the reg and say, how did you do it? What's the blueprint? We want to do it too. And it's so funny because like I watch the emails that come through because obviously I help her a lot in this. And like the other day I texted her and I was just like, isn't it so frustrating that you created this thing that everybody wants to copy? You know, and obviously we just do it for the love of the game, like, and, you know, to make Earth better. But it is kind of funny that like, she's somebody that should be a millionaire. You know what I'm saying? Like the amount of time she gives all these other states to watch these people probably not do it as efficiently as she's going to do it. You know, like to me, she's another one that shouldn't have to worry about money or at least make a decent salary for what she does. But having said that, back to the legislation piece before I ramble too long, I think we should have some legislation that encourages firearms shops and trainers. I think people should be able to get discounts on insurance. Insurance is expensive. You know, if you're going to give me an insurance break for putting a fence around my pool, you should also give 702 range down the street an insurance break if they promote better mental health, responsible storage, and suicide prevention, right? It just goes hand in hand. I think we need to reward people. If we're going to give money to countries to fight wars that aren't even ours, then why can't we give money to American citizens that are pushing a good message and doing things the responsible way? Um, God, my car insurance company just wants to put a tracking device on my car called the safe driver thing, and they were willing to give me a hell of a break if I did it. I'm not going to do it because I just don't want that. I don't know if my wife could obey the speeding law, so I think that would work against me. But
your rate goes up.
yeah, but I do appreciate that they want to give me a device and give me a break on my insurance by doing the right thing. And I think that we can have legislation that promotes doing the right thing and rewarding people for doing the right thing. Too many times in this society, we want to reward people when they do the wrong thing. When they get into debt and they, don't get me started on the way certain companies were bailed out of certain situations because of what they spent and what they did. But on the flip side of that, we can probably get a lot more people on board to carry messages and provide resources if we can reward them some way. And to me, that's positive gun legislation. It has everything to do with rewarding people for doing the right thing. Doesn't have anything to do with restriction. So I want to make that clear for anybody who just tuned in for maybe part of the sentence. Legislation that doesn't restrict firearms owners from their Second Amendment rights and rewards them for doing the right thing can be very positive and can be great. And Gal already proved that in the state of Louisiana. So let's get rebates for people that want to buy safes. I mean, let's figure out creative ways. And if you want to use it, you use it. And if you don't, you don't. Right? You opt in. You don't have to be compelled to do it, but you opt in it, and then you can change the world.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the middle that aren't really anti-gun, I think you used the word gun neutral, seeing those solutions put forth by the 2A community and the gun industry will help them kind of support that. The media, yeah, there's going to be some censorship on those great ideas and that, but if more people get exposed to the ideas that are alternative to gun control, then you'll have opportunities to get more supporters that wouldn't have had maybe that opportunity before.
Yeah, you mentioned the media there, and I think it's important that I say this to anyone who's listening today that hasn't heard it in the past. The media is not all bad. There's a lot of good people in the media, and I've met them. And the only reason I say that is I've given them a lot, and I haven't been burned yet. As a matter of fact, the only time I've ever been burned by anything I've done is by my own people who I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe misunderstood what I was up to or what I was doing, right? But so far, I've worked with a lot of media that people would say do not like us, that won't give us a fair shake. And when they've heard about what we're doing, either they leave us alone or they're changing their minds. And so I think it's important that everyone understand, like, the more and more we talk about this stuff, the more and more we present our solutions, the better it is. And I think of, like, just even working and talking with CNN now, who I've had a couple meetings with, just the fact that they haven't done anything to burn me, and they've asked my opinions on some things, and I just had some great nuanced conversations with them, and I think that we need to get more and more of those out there. I think the media will come once they see longevity in what we're doing and everything that's happening. But people are tired of just hearing "Pride from my cold dead hands." Like, they are, and I can appreciate that. I understand that it's true, but it's not the best way to end an argument, or to provide solutions to somebody who's struggling with firearms and what it can do in a negative light.
Yeah, it's interesting you mention longevity. It seems like there's a ton of people that you're working with a lot more closely now who kind of came around and checked out Walk the Talk maybe in 2020, 2021, or 2022. And then just now they're getting more actively involved. It seems like a lot of people wanted to see the longevity and make sure there wasn't crash and burn or anything. And it's interesting of you think about that now and then who's circling now that's kind of being introduced to Walk the Talk America and things now that's going to be that impactful 2 years or a year down the road.
Yeah, I guess people need to know their staying power. It's funny. I've had some friends that were like, yeah, when you started this, I didn't know if you're going to stick with it. And I wanted to be like, well, what have I showed you that I don't stick with? Like I was an eagle for, 20 years of my life. So I don't know, but I guess it was such a foreign new concept. I remember when I first came up with the idea and I was trying to share it with as many people as possible. Inside the firearms community. And I had people that were kind of like, oh, it's a good idea. And then it took them a long time to kind of get on board. And I think, the staying power helped, and the fact that they knew that this wasn't just an idea that I was having and I was going to abandon it and figure out something else. Then I remember there was a few people that didn't think this was going to work. I remember having a discussion with pretty prominent female representative of the firearms industry. And I remember she was like, yeah, it's not a good idea. No one cares. Like, no one cares. And that was fuel for me to keep going. I remember like that still burns in my memory that like I had this like amazing idea and she just crapped all over it. Um, and it's things like that where I was just like, I want to, I'm competitive by nature. So it's just like everything I do, I just want to win. I just, you know what I mean? I have to keep that mentality even when it comes to better mental health and suicide prevention. It's just like, I feel like we could be the leaders in this space, and certainly sticking around for 6 years and what we've accomplished, if it ends all tomorrow, if it just got taken away, I feel like we did make our mark on society. Like little things, right? Like I look at the press release from MedAlert that came out talking about the relationship of Walk the Talk America and Gun Alert. And that was in Yahoo Finance. You know what I mean? Like in a press release. These things seem corny and they seem small, but it's crazy. Like when you look at this stuff, and you're just like, it's just another cool thing that just literally is like out there. And it's Walk the Talk America. We have like one of the most generic names that sticks with people. I think it can be a household thing. So
Well, I think we did it. We're just over an hour and three, but we tackled all five and pretty condensed and effectively. Do you have any last minute thoughts on this topic or?
no, just, it is Suicide Prevention Week, wrapped in Suicide Prevention Month. And I know I ask everyone to push these messages all the time, but if there's a month you're going to do it or a week you're going to do it, like, please get out there and talk about it. The more, like I said, the more gun staunch 2A supporters that are out there talking about this, I think the more minds are blown, right? Like, I think it's super important because, like I've said in the past, the expectation level for us when it comes to these two topics, mental health and suicide prevention, is so low that it's important we talk about it, right? Going back to that competitive thing, like I want to freak people out that are like, damn, I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know that you people cared, right? I always thought you people wanted to arm everybody and that's all you cared about. Now, when we're out there talking about these things, it's like the old 8 Mile analogy. It's like we're going to take it away from them before they can even start. We know what they feel. We know how they feel about us. We know what they say about us. But let's take the high road. Let's promote these things. Let's be the people that are there. Let's be the first responders that are there before everybody else when it comes to these situations. Talk about it. Share the message. If it's not Walk to Talk's message, share somebody else's message. There's a few other organizations out there that are really putting in good work. And if they make a post that speaks to your heart, share that one. And I'm talking about everybody from Kids Safe to Hold My Guns to NSSF's programs. They've kicked off. We did some stuff for them for this month. Just share that. Send it to friends, that you might think need it or would be interested in hearing about it. So do your best to spread the word.
All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors that make that happen, and all their ad reads will be on the podcast once it's produced. And yeah, check out our social media pages that thanks to High Point, they're donating some walk boxes for us to give away. So look on Facebook later today, and then we're going to rotate through all the different social media platforms this week. But yeah, share the message, and thanks for joining.